This is Chris Carlson, and welcome to the Boulder Banking Podcast. My guest is Mike Jacobson, President and CEO of NebraskaLand Bank. Mike currently serves in the Nebraska State Senate. I know you will love not only the story of Mike's journey, but also his thoughts on how bankers are uniquely positioned to add value as an elected official. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be with you.
Mike, you're going through a really interesting journey, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. But before we talk about that, can you give us a brief background of Mike Jacobson?
Well, sure. It's kind of interesting. I grew up on a rented farm in Clay County, Nebraska. 7 brothers and sisters, no running water in the house when I was a kid. Went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, graduated with a degree in ag economics and ag education. Always wanted to farm, came back to the rented farm. And fortunately, my wife was smart and had a good job as a research chemist. And so I farmed on the side and then ended up being offered a job as a vocational agriculture teacher in the area. And so I did that for 4 years while also farming, and then was offered a job in 1980 at City National Bank in Hastings to be an ag loan officer. And I took that job, and 42 years later, here I am. I was with First Commerce for 19 years, and then in 1998 left First Commerce and chartered NebraskaLand, at that time NebraskaLand National Bank. We raised $3 million in capital. I sold the first farm I ever bought to go all in with equity. I told people since that the bank would have failed, I'd have been broken out of a job. But things worked okay, and we're going to be staring at our 25th anniversary next May.
Well, tell us a little bit about NebraskaLand Bank.
Well, like I say, the bank was chartered 24 and a half years ago. There were 3 of us that left the First Commerce organization. Kim Schroll was my right-hand person, and she and I got her convinced to go with me. She was leading the operations there, and of course I was the CEO and had the banking background. And then we ended up actually hiring Kim's sister Krista, who today is my chief credit officer. So there were the 3 of us, and then actually one other individual who ran the back room operations. So it was myself and 3 women, and we headed off and started the bank with some outside investors. And I brought in another banker who had a larger organization to help us from a correspondent standpoint. And then 2 years later, we bought them out. And so it's myself as a founder and one of the 2 principal shareholders. And then we have a number of minority shareholders. And I made it a point that all of our employees, all of our key staff have had opportunities to either buy direct equity in the holding company, or they have restricted stock. Really, it's kind of a golden handcuff. And I'm a big believer that if you own a piece of the rock, you're going to work that much harder. And that's certainly made a big difference in retaining quality staff and being able to grow efficiently and safely.
And then, Mike, do you target the ag market specifically, or are you a broad-based type bank?
Well, that's the crazy thing about it, is we're not even considered an ag bank. Today, we're about $875 million in total assets, and we have about 20% of our loans are in ag real estate and ag operating. The predominant core business is commercial real estate and C&I loans. One thing I didn't want to do is I did not want to be a big consumer lender, so we've never bought dealer paper. We've never gone into areas of heavy consumer finance. What I learned in my years with First Commerce when I worked for their flagship bank, the National Bank of Commerce in Lincoln, is it takes a lot of people. That you're dealing with customers that are not necessarily relationship customers, they're transactional. And in my mind, to be a great community bank, you want to deal with relationship lending. You want borrowers who are going to establish a relationship with you and you with them. You get to know them over the years. They get to know you. They trust you. You trust them. And they become much less rate sensitive. And you can invest your time into them and really, truly do a great job of helping them grow their business. And I also kind of felt that from the consumer side, there's so many big banks and non-bank lenders out there that over time, I just felt that the consumer business was going to move away And what we've seen today, in my mind, is on the consumer side is, if you think about it, what do consumer borrowers borrow for? Other than home equity and home mortgages, which we do those, they've got credit cards. You pay point of sale. You're doing dealer finance. So the number one loan request you're going to get is to refinance credit cards. And I just don't see that as a long-term winning proposition. So we stayed away from consumer to the extent that we can. As we do consumer loans, but we don't market consumer loans to anybody. And we really focus on CRE and C&I. We tend to do larger dollar deals for the size of our bank because we bring the expertise and we can be the experts in the market, which really helps us in terms of attracting and retaining quality customers, because they're big enough where the big banks might have an interest in them, but they want that personal contact that we can bring. So we are able to attract those customers and retain them. So we have fewer customers, but bigger customers, better quality information, easier to manage. And so we're able to do it with fewer employees as well.
Sounds like the strategy's working.
It has.
Great. Well, Mike, as you know, we're talking to bankers who are committed to public service. And you have a very unique thing going on in your life, if you will, is that you are a Nebraska State Senator. And here's my question for you. How did you come to serve as a Nebraska State Senator?
Well, that's a great question. I've had a good relationship with our governor, Pete Ricketts, who I think has been an outstanding governor. And he's now being term limited. And so I've been on his Ag Advisory Committee really since he was elected. And so the last 8 years, I've spent time working with him on the Ag Advisory Committee. But, I've also worked with a number of Republican candidates and over the years. And last summer, I gave some consideration to running for the legislature because I knew that our current state senator was term limited. But we were looking at maybe expanding the bank at the time. And the governor had actually reached out to me and encouraged me to run. And I just told him I just didn't think I had the time to do it. And so I didn't get in the race. Well, meanwhile, 3 other candidates got in the race. So then what happened was, when our current state senator ran into an issue and ended up resigning in the middle of the legislative session, the governor called me and said, Mike, would you reconsider getting into the race? I'm not comfortable with the other candidates. Would love to have you throw your hat in the ring. Agree to sit for an interview. I'd like to appoint you. You've done these things in North Platte. I'd like to see you bring it to the state legislature and do it there. So things had changed for us. I talked to my staff. I talked to one of the other candidates that I was supporting. They all told me you need to do this. So I sat for an interview on the Tuesday after President's Day. And the next morning, on Wednesday morning, I got a call from the governor and said, how quickly could he be down there? We're in the middle of the session. I want to swear you in yet today, and I want you casting votes tomorrow. So that's what happened.
So you were appointed, and now, though, you're in the midst of a campaign, and I wanted to ask you, what is it like on the campaign trail?
Well, I like to tell people, don't try this at home. Okay. Being in the legislature has been a great experience, and I would encourage people to do that. I would not encourage them to do it the way I have, because when I was appointed, we're in what we refer to as the 60-day working session. So our primary election was in early May, and the legislature didn't adjourn until the middle of April. So I had about 20 days to actually go out and knock on doors and truly campaign. Otherwise, I was stuck in the legislature and working every day there, going all day sessions, late night sessions. So I had to put together a campaign advisor, hire them. I actually hired the one that the candidate I was backing was using, ordered signs, did mailers, did TV and radio advertising, but really had no ability to go out and go hand-to-hand campaigning. There were 2 other candidates in the race yet. So what ended up happening is the top 2 vote getters in the primary went to the general election. So the top vote getter and myself, we were basically in a it was a statistical tie. He edged me out by about 50 votes. and he had been in the market and he'd been in the campaign for a little over a year, and had some people following him and endorsements and so on. And so at the end of the day, he and I now have been campaigning in the general election. And what will help me here is the fact that I do have voting experience. I've got a number of lobbyists who have seen what I can do in the legislature and have backed me. I've had a number of people here in the market have backed me, some that were backing my opponent, who, once I got appointed, decided they would back me. And then I've had an opportunity to go out now and campaign. So I feel good about where the race is. You never say never, that it's over. I'm looking forward to November 8th getting here, which is election day, and we'll see where it goes. But I think I'm in pretty good position. Hope to get elected and spend the next 4 years working in the legislature as well as sticking here with the bank.
Now, Mike, how many doors have you knocked on?
Probably a little north of 4,000 at this point.
Wow. I mean, we think about the banking world and the tenacity that it takes to be successful in business development. And I think knocking on 4,000 doors as a candidate for a state senator shows that tenacity. And it's going to be probably very critical to your success.
I think that's right. And I would just tell you that the other thing I always told people not to try at home is go charter a bank. And we've done that twice now. Of course, I always say that in jest, but if you're going to do it, you better be prepared to put it into work. You better be prepared to take some bullets. It's not for the weak at heart. It's not for the meek. You know, you're going to have to work very, very hard, and you've got to be willing to go around the clock. And like I say, take a few bullets along the way to get there. But at the end of the day, chartering the bank was worth it, and I believe being in the legislature has been worth it.
Well, Mike, I'm going to kind of go into the weeds with you on a question here. What are your thoughts about serving on a committee versus being a committee chair?
Well, I've been asked that question by the leadership. You know, coming into the legislative session, my predecessor was not overly popular, and I'm using that word a little bit in jest. He was quite unpopular, particularly among the Democrats in the body and really a lot of Republicans in the body, because he was very brash, very abrasive. And I think they really welcomed someone coming in, being more of a statesman, being respectful, not having to speak on every bill, but when you do speak, you've got something to say and you can articulate it. And I think that was really appreciated. And so that was very helpful. And so when we got to adjournment, the leadership was saying, well, Mike, you come back next year, you'll be a redshirt freshman. Have you thought about what committees you want to be on, and would you like to be a committee chair? And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm working on the committees. I've got a pretty good idea what I want to do there. I absolutely do not want to be a committee chair. And they said, why not? And I said, I don't want to be a committee chair because I believe if you're going to be effective in the legislature, coming in as a freshman or a redshirt freshman and ticking off all of the senior people who had eyes on being a chairman are not going to get you a long ways. My whole purpose for being in the Nebraska legislature, so I could go down, make a difference for my district and make a difference for the state of Nebraska. And if you're going to go down and make a difference and be effective, you better be able to build relationships. And the best way to build relationships is earn your stripes, earn the respect. The committee chairmanships and the vice chairmanships will come if you do your job right, but don't attempt to do it as a freshman.
Love that attitude. Well, Mike, what challenges does serving in public office have in your role as president CEO of NebraskaLand Bank?
Well, I've been very, very fortunate because I've got an incredibly talented team. And, I was chairman of the Nebraska Bankers Association back in 08 and 09. And for those of you who remember your calendars very well, 08 and 09 was a little bit of a challenging time for the banking industry, particularly those of us that were heavy into CRE. And I can tell you that I enjoyed the time as the NBA chairman, but it was also a time where I took a step back, and the bank was at a point where my senior staff were capable of doing much more than I had them doing. And it was time for me to step away a little bit because I needed to, and allow them to make more of the decisions. So we formed our executive management team, our C-suite, so to speak. And so there's four of us that make up the executive leadership team. And we work together, and I've got two people that oversee the loan side. Kim Schroll, as I mentioned before, oversees operations. So I became more of a resource and more of focused on strategic issues and asset liability management. And they really work the other parts of the bank. And so I've slowly but surely been stepping back away from any day-to-day things, really more focusing on big picture. So when this came up, it was really a good transition because I'm now in a great position to be able to meet people in Lincoln and Omaha and other parts of the state. And I can be more of an ambassador for the bank as well in this role. And my staff can do what they were trained to do and ready to do, and just take a bigger role in running the day-to-day of the bank. So it really has worked well from the banking perspective as well.
So, Mike, I want to kind of go a little bit deeper on that, what you just said. Are there opportunities that are created for the bank because you're serving in the public office?
Absolutely. And it's not done necessarily on an intentional basis. It just kind of happens. You know, if you can get into the legislature and people know you as a banker and they listen to what you do, they watch the things that you do as a legislator, and you get lobbied by different industries and they're talking to you, whether it be manufacturers or insurance industry or whomever, you start meeting people and they start understanding what you do. And they start asking you about the bank and how does this work? And the next thing you know, they're wanting to know, hey, I've got some projects I want to do. Are you guys open to doing those? And my first response is, hey, my staff runs the bank. Go talk to them. I'll give you their card. You're welcome to work with them. I'm going to focus on the legislature, but here's the people you need to talk to at the bank if you want to pursue that. And so I get out of the middle and they work their magic and go from there. And so we have had customers that we've picked up along the way because we go not only throughout the state of Nebraska, but outside the state on a lot of our CRE projects. And so we've picked up a number of business customers that just knew of me, realized what we did and said, gosh, are you guys open to working with us? We're maybe getting full with the banks that we're working with and we'd like to diversify, or we've got projects out in the rural part of the state. Gosh, we'd love to work with your bank. And so because of that, I'm able to hand them off to lenders here and I get out of the transaction. And many cases, I'm not at loan committee. I don't even see what's being approved and not approved, but I was probably the initial point of contact.
Well, what advice would you give to bankers who are considering a role in public service, be it appointed or elected?
Well, I think that there's opportunities there, and there's opportunities beyond just the part of adding something to your resume. From my standpoint, I look at it. I went down there for probably a different reason than a lot of my colleagues because, I'm 68. I'm at a point in my career where I could slow down and travel more and still be involved with the bank, and decided that this was something that was kind of a higher calling. And I want to be down there to make a difference, not to build a resume. But I think there are a number of banking colleagues like me who have learned a lot over the years in banking because you're exposed to so many things. You've served on so many other boards. In my case, serve on the hospital board. I understand the healthcare issues. I understand the issues in economic development and housing. And so bankers are so well equipped to serve in their legislatures and state government because they can bring real solutions to problems that others don't even see. And I can tell you that coming down to the legislature and just dealing with the bills that I dealt with, I've developed so much respect from younger people in particular in the legislature who don't have this background and say, wow, here's somebody that can actually talk the talk and really understands what's going on. And you can truly be effective on the floor because now, rather than listening to a lobbyist, they're actually listening to a fellow legislator who's articulating problems and telling you from both sides, why is this a problem? How can we fix it? And why is this the right solution? So I really, truly would encourage people, particularly bankers that are getting closer to a point where they can take a break like I have and go down and use that expertise and make a difference in your state.
Well, Mike, if you were to go back in time when you started in banking, what advice would the current Mike give to the younger Mike?
Well, that's a good question. I would tell you that there were things that I did early on starting the bank that probably it helped me that I did not focus on what if this doesn't work. That was never a consideration. And so to me, I looked at what do I need to be successful? How do I find people that can complement my skills so that we can get the bank off the ground and make it successful? I've often talked about that. I feel kind of like Evel Knievel trying to jump the Grand Canyon. If you thought about it very much about what you're attempting to do, you probably wouldn't do it. And fortunately, Kim and Krista and I in particular never really thought about failure until we got 2 or 3 years in and we were past the risk of failure. And we looked back and said, wow, there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong. So, but they didn't. And so I would just tell people that don't ever look back. And if you make the decision to do this, charter a bank in particular, get your capital lined up, make sure you got the right people in place and look straight ahead. And I would tell you that it's all about getting the right people, getting the right vision and the mission, and being prepared to get out of their way along the way and let your people grow. And that served us really, really well. And there's times when I was tempted to not let go and let them run. And if I had something to do over again, I probably would have transitioned to the executive management team sooner than I did. But things still worked out. But I would say to the extent you can involve people in management decisions, you're going to build longevity of your employees, and you're going to get a better outcome.
Great words of wisdom. Well, Mike, I know that we're going to have listeners that are going to want to reach out to you. But before I ask you how they can get in contact with you, I want to put the caveat, don't contact Mike until after November 8th. He's got more doors to knock on. But if after November 8th, Mike, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, I would say email me and email me at my email address is M as in Mike, Jacobson with an O. So it's MJACOBSON at N as in Nancy, L as in Larry, N as in Nancy, B as in boy.com. That's the acronym for Nebraska Land National Bank. We're not a national bank anymore. We converted to a state charter, but we left that. So it's mjacobson at nlnb.com. And that's the best way to reach me. Note that you're a banker, note the podcast, and I'll make sure and prioritize the email and read it and get back to you.
Mike, I know you're knee deep in this campaign. We've had these conversations. I know you're incredibly busy. Thanks for taking time to share your journey with our audience.
Hey, I appreciate you including me and happy to do it.
Thanks, Mike.